Good afternoon, everyone. I had mentioned earlier that I would hold press conferences from time to time to share my thinking with Singaporeans through the media. I had just delivered the NDR last week, so I thought it would be useful to have this press conference today to take stock of what we have done so far and what Singaporeans can expect in the months ahead. For my first National Day rally, I wanted to flesh out in more concrete terms the aspirations and hopes that Singaporeans had shared with us during the Forward Singapore exercise. And that's what I had tried to do throughout the 3 rally speeches. Our aspirations and new ambitions are underpinned by 2 important pillars. The first is a renewed social compact, a compact where every Singaporean will get support to get through setbacks in life and to get a fair shot in life. But at the same time, everyone must do their part to work hard, make the effort to excel and uplift their families. And if they do that, the government will be there to support them every step of the way and help them to get ahead. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is a refreshed Singapore dream, where we can find our own paths. We don't have to compare with one another. We can all be the best possible versions of ourselves. In other words, we can thrive and flourish on our own terms and in ways that are less prescribed and more open. So these 2 key pillars underpin, I believe, what Singaporeans would like to see in the future for ourselves and for Singapore. And as I said, realizing these shared goals requires a major reset in our policies, but also a reset in our attitudes and mindsets. In the NDR, I've tried to focus on changes in a few key areas, like parental leave arrangements, job seeker support, and education, where I see these changes and resets happening. Not just policies, but attitudes. I couldn't cover everything, but I focused on a few. Beyond the topics at the NDR, there are other issues we are looking at. For example, how we can better look after our seniors, especially their longer-term care and housing needs. It's a big issue which will continue to grow because of our increasing number of seniors. And so we are very much focused on this. And it's not just about helping those in their 70s and 80s, the older folks, but as we do more to take care of them, we will also be helping their children, who increasingly are not so young anymore. They are 50s now, young seniors. And many of them do feel sandwiched because they have to look after aged parents, but still have children themselves to look after. So that's one key area of concern and focus which we are continuing to study. Another issue is tackling cost of living concerns. I mentioned this in the National Day message and the different schemes we have to help Singaporeans cope with cost of living concerns. We have broad-based schemes like CDC vouchers. We also have more targeted schemes like cost of living payouts and USAVE rebates that are for lower and middle income groups. But as I mentioned in the rally, we are now also looking at specific segments and how we can provide more help. For example, those with larger families, more young children, and which means the costs add up quite quickly, and so we are seeing how we can provide more support for them. So these are existing issues which we are thinking about, which we are studying, but there will also be new issues we pick up through our engagements with Singaporeans. And that's why I see these regular engagements with Singaporeans as a very important aspect of my work. I've embarked on visits to several districts now, and it's a very good opportunity for me to meet residents and to hear firsthand their perspectives and feedback. And I'm continuing to have dialogue sessions with different segments of society and also through social media and press conferences like this. And I hope that through these engagements, we can help everyone in Singapore have a common picture of why the government is embarking on certain plans, where we are heading towards, and what we can all do in big and small ways to realize our shared vision together. This is the commitment from me and my team. We are here to listen to you, to understand firsthand your concerns, hopes and dreams, and to build a stronger, more meaningful connection with every Singaporean. Besides the domestic focus, we cannot neglect our external environment. There are powerful forces shaping the world around us, and these will have direct impact on Singapore. Just think about the number of shocks and crises that have buffeted the world in, say, the last 5 years. You start counting, and I think very quickly you will lose count. Unfortunately, we must expect even more to come in the coming years, because we are in a world with increasing geopolitical tensions and armed conflicts everywhere. It's a world with growing fragmentation in the global economy and rising barriers to trade, which means more impact and stresses on the global supply chains. It's a world with a whole range of external threats, including the latest outbreak of Mpox, which we are monitoring very carefully and closely. So in this dangerous and troubled world, our relations with other countries are crucial, and establishing good rapport with friends, old and new, is also a key priority for me. I've hosted several of them and several visitors in Singapore recently. The Prime Ministers for Cambodia and Laos visited. We've got many visitors coming for the Shangri-La Dialogue recently. I've also made trips to our closest neighbors, Malaysia and Indonesia, and in the coming months, I will be doing more visits to ASEAN countries, and then in time to come with visits to our key partners outside of Southeast Asia. I will also be attending a few international summits. They have the ASEAN Summit, APEC, and G20 all coming up in the latter part of this year. These are all opportunities for me to touch base with my counterparts. Some I've met before, but it's important I meet them in my new capacity and establish good personal relations at the leadership level, because that sets the tone for our overall relationship. In some countries, there have been or there will be changes in government, and that means potentially working with new governments, new people, new leaders, even as we renew ties with old friends. So that's how we navigate this new environment, always staying nimble and vigilant, continually finding ways to strengthen our partnerships and build new connections, and to maintain our relevance on the global stage. I didn't get a chance to say much about foreign policy or the external environment at the rally, but I will find future occasions to do so. It's important for me to engage Singaporeans on these issues, because I think everyone needs to understand what's at stake, especially on critical issues where our collective security and fundamental interests are involved. We must be able to come together as one people, despite our differences in perspectives, and take a common pro-Singapore position to advance our national interests together. So we have a full agenda ahead of us, both domestic and foreign, and we will have to continue working closely together to chart our new way forward towards a better Singapore in the years to come. I'm happy to take questions from all of you.
Okay, thank you, PM. I will call you when you call. When I call you, please introduce yourself and then ask your question. And I repeat, please try to keep to 1 to 2 max questions. Let's have it first from Straits Times, please.
Thank you, PM. I'm Lynette from the Straits Times. My question is, when you spoke to some of us just before you became PM, you mentioned that you were prepared to relook all assumptions. So what assumptions are we challenging with the announcements in NDR, and in what other ways are we prepared to be bold, as you said?
Well, I think the biggest assumption of all is that we must never assume the good things in life just fall on our laps, and that things magically work, everything just works in place, everything is hunky-dory in Singapore. That will be the big assumption, and I think we have to continually question that, not assume that we can simply cruise along just with the status quo. So always looking at each and every issue, feedback that we receive, but also looking at policies and asking ourselves, can we do better? Is there a better way of doing things? It's not so much to change for the sake of change alone, but to always have the perspective that some things can be improved. Yes, there may be trade-offs, but perhaps circumstances have changed. Perhaps our conditions are different. Perhaps Singaporeans' appreciation of the trade-offs are different today. And perhaps there are new technologies, new solutions. So in each of these areas, across all our policies, always looking to do better for Singapore and Singaporeans.
Okay, well, next question. CNA.
Hi, good afternoon, PM. Geraldine from CNA. So I think you spoke earlier about how in the first few months of your term, you've been meeting up with the ASEAN leaders, whether it's traveling to countries or them coming to Singapore. It seems like the focus in the first few months has been in ASEAN, but in the next few months, you will also be traveling a bit further afield. So I just wanted to get your sense of what your priorities might be as you travel to meet with these leaders from different countries, especially given that you've mentioned in some countries we might see a change in government.
Well, the next few months are still going to be ASEAN because I've only covered 2 countries for now, Malaysia and Indonesia, Malaysia and Brunei. I will be visiting Indonesia soon, most likely after they have sworn in the new government. I certainly with other ASEAN countries as well. And then in due course, I will look at visiting countries outside of ASEAN. But even for the countries that I've already visited, like Malaysia, I think we have such a close relationship with so many issues being discussed that there will be more than one occasion to visit. So, for example, we are already planning for our leaders' retreat later this year, where Prime Minister and Anwar and I can take stock of the bilateral discussions on a whole range of issues and see how we can make further progress. So, clearly, it starts with ASEAN because these are neighbors around us. We have closer relationships with all of them, and we want to advance these bilateral ties. But in due course, I will be visiting outside of ASEAN too. And of course, the international forums allows me an opportunity without having to visit the country to meet many people at the same time. That includes APEC and G20.
Thanks, PM. Hang on. Next question, Channel 8.
Good afternoon, PM. I'm Kawai from Channel 8. My question is, there's been many policies and initiatives that you announced during this year's NDR, such as to encourage Singaporeans to procreate. However, many of this time is about individual choices and mindset, and some of these just go beyond policies.
Yes.
So what more do you think we should do to change the mindset of people?
Well, as I mentioned in the rally speech, getting married, having children, these are deeply personal choices, and we understand that. Everyone will have views on such matters. And for many young people that we engage, there are also competing aspirations and goals because they want to do well in their careers. They also want to pursue their own personal goals. And they will have to find a balance for themselves. I think what the government should focus on and what we are indeed focusing on is to look at how we can create a more family-friendly environment in Singapore. So it's less of the perhaps older previous approach where it's incentives for babies, but rather than direct incentives towards procreation per se, it's to take the resources and see how we can use these resources to create a more family-friendly environment in general in Singapore. And that means looking at areas of concern for many young parents and families like preschool and education. It means looking at leave arrangements because many young parents do want to spend time with their children, especially when they are infants. And then it also means looking at areas like cost of living because, as I've mentioned just now, we know that many parents with children, especially when they have more than 3 or more kids, the cost starts to add up. It's not just your groceries and your daily necessities, but even fetching kids from place to place. If you have a big family, you need to make arrangements, and then all of these costs can pile up very quickly. So if we focus our minds on these areas and apply resources in these areas of need, I hope we can create over time, a culture, sort of appreciation that in Singapore we have an environment which is conducive for families. And then at the end of the day, we must let Singaporeans decide, but hopefully with that wider environment, more people will be encouraged and motivated to settle down and have kids.
Okay, thanks, PM. Let's take from, I think, Zhao Bao. You had a question?
Hi, PM. This is Eileen from Zhao Bao.
Yes, your mic is on.
Okay. So I would like to ask, you mentioned in your NDR speech that we need to be bold but prudent, resetting policies and attitudes, but at the same time also respecting past. So how could you bring us through your thought process on how you come up with this speech? And also, how are people going to square this seemingly different set of ideas, like so somehow contradictory? And then
What kind of contradictory ideas you mean?
As in dichotomous, like as in bold, prudent, bold, and then resetting major resetting, but at the same time also honoring the past.
Yeah.
And then just a follow-up on what you said just now. You said you have visited some districts. So where did you visit after Tampines?
Weren't the media with me?
Sorry?
Weren't the media with me in these visits after Tampines? Okay, no, I'm just curious. I thought you would have been with me all the while. Let's see, after Tampines, I visited Tanjong Pagar. I visited my own Marsiling UT. And then what was one more? West Coast, I think. Yeah, these were the few. I think most of them we are quite happy to have the media come and cover, but there will be occasions, a few where we don't think it's necessary because there's really nothing much to highlight, and so we think it's there's no need to trouble the media for all the visits, especially when there's no new thing to cover or highlight. So we'll just keep it without media coverage. But other than that, if many of the visits, we are quite happy for the media to come along, and we have been. And similarly for the subsequent visits, I'm sure there will be opportunities for the media to cover these visits as well. On the first question, how to balance between respecting the past and also being bold for the future, not allowing the past to constrain our options for the future. It is a balancing act, but what I would say is we have to then come back to what are the fundamentals that are relevant, still relevant for us today, and which we must uphold. These are important fundamental principles. It could be multiculturalism, it could be an ethos of self-reliance, focus on families, right? These are all important values and fundamentals which we want to preserve. So if we understand what these are, then we don't discard them. We retain them even as we think about making bold changes. And a clear illustration of that is when we think about doing unemployment benefit. It's something that the government all this while for many, many decades has had reservations about for good reasons, because we have seen how unemployment insurance in other countries have led to negative effects. But it doesn't mean that we cannot do something different in Singapore, appropriately designed for our circumstances and well designed to minimize the negative effects we have seen elsewhere. So we have taken a lot of time thinking about these issues and eventually coming up with a job seeker support scheme, which we think allows us to find that right balance. Doing something different, something new, but at the same time putting in place appropriate conditions that will also require individuals to do their part, to work hard, to get career coaching, to get skills training, and job matching.
How are we going to adjust the budget to accommodate these additional expenses?
We will find a budget. I mean, a lot of the initiatives that we are undertaking under Forward Singapore, and which I've announced, will require additional resources. But in some ways, when we start, when we factor in not the annual budgets, because the annual budgets looks at only 1 year ahead, but if you had recalled, MOF had put up a medium-term budget forecast, where we set out some of our expectations for how budgets will rise and expenditures will rise in the coming years. We had already started thinking about rising expenditure requirements due to aging populations, due to our rising social expenditures, and we knew that we needed to put in place revenue tax changes and adjustments in order to ensure that we have sufficient revenues for the medium term. So we will make sure that all of these new social initiatives that incur additional resources will be met by sufficient revenues in a way that's fiscally sustainable.
Next question, CNA Digital. You pass to the front.
Hi, thank you, PM. Fabian from CNA Digital here. So today marks 100 full days since you took office. Just wondering, what were your immediate priorities in these first 100 days, and do you think you achieved them? And also, what has been the biggest challenges so far?
Well, I don't think of 100 day, 200 day, any of these milestones. I mean, I think the first priority for me after taking over was to think about what new directions, having had a leadership transition and a new government in place, what will we do to take Singapore forward in our next bound? And for Singaporeans, what does that mean? What does a new leader, a new government mean? And how do we anticipate that Singapore will move forward in this next phase of nation building? That was the key priority for me immediately after the leadership transition. And to do that, I took reference, of course, from the exercise which we had just completed, the Forward Singapore exercise, which indeed set out very clearly our shared ambitions for our next bound. And so, as I mentioned just now, one of my key priorities at the beginning is to flesh out what Forward Singapore means, beyond the slogan, beyond the catchphrase. What does it mean in concrete terms? And I've tried to do over a period of, over the last few months, since taking over, in different engagements, in different dialogue sessions, but the National Day rally itself was an opportunity for me, for the first time, at such a national platform, to bring it all together and to crystallize it, hopefully in clearer and more concrete terms. And I hope I have been able to do that. But this is not the end of it. As I said, there will be more to come, and we are continuing to work on different issues.
Okay, next question. Quite a few hands. Next, Business Times.
Hi, PM Sharon from Business Times. I was wondering, during your visits and engagements with Singaporeans, could you share maybe what's your sense of what Singaporeans are most satisfied with right now versus what are they most unhappy about? And how are you planning to fix this before the next GE? Thank you.
I think for the most part, many Singaporeans I engage with appreciate that what we have in Singapore is unique and special. Because we are a well-informed people. We can see what's happening around us in many countries around the world where there have been tremendous pressures on society, and you see societies crumbling, you see trust falling apart, and it's very hard for the center to hold together. And people can see that in countries in many different places, and people appreciate that what we have in Singapore is something quite special for Singaporeans of diverse backgrounds to be able to interact, share common bonds with one another, and for us to have a high level of trust as a society, both amongst ourselves as Singaporeans and between the government and the people. I think that's unique. That's something we should always cherish, and that's why, as I said just now to the first question, we must never take that for granted. I mean, this thing does not just magically sustain by itself. It's something very unique if you look around the world, and we must all do our part to keep it this way, make it even better, and then to ask ourselves, what do we need to do to improve policies, to change policies, to change attitudes, mindsets, in order for us to keep moving in that trajectory. As far as concerns are in terms of the issues of concerns that are raised, it's the ones that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. Cost of living is one major concern. But if you unpack cost of living, there are different aspects to it. And I mean, there's the day-to-day cost of living because of groceries, food, and you know, the day-to-day essentials. That's one aspect of it. But there are also other sort of big-ticket items, if you will. Housing. It's not something you have to do every day, but the people who have to purchase a home then sometimes feel that home prices have gone up, and I've explained why in the rally because of COVID, and why it's getting a bit better now, but still there is a way, and there's still more room for us to look at how to stabilize the market. So cost of living comes up, but within cost of living, it's not, there are different aspects to it. It could be housing, it could be COE, it could be day-to-day expenses.
Okay, next question. Berita Harian.
Hi, Mr. Prime Minister.
Hello.
Atia from Berita Harian. After 100 days, how have you, or what have you better learned about the Malay Muslim sentiments on the day-to-day or local issues, as well as the external issues, and how did you prepare your Malay NDR speech? And then secondly, on the Islamic College, how do you think this will complete or complement the current education system, and how does it play a role in terms of that multiple pathways of success? Thank you.
I've always had engagements with the Malay Muslim community. It's not only because of the leadership transition, but of course, after the transition itself, I've continued to step up my engagements with different groups, whether it's through MQ, whether it's on festive occasions, whether it's having engagements with young leaders, which I did, and then shared some of their stories. As I said, I've always valued these engagement sessions. In many ways, the concerns that I hear from the Malay Muslim community, many of them are similar to national concerns, not very different. The hopes, aspirations are also similar to national concerns. But of course, there will also be issues specific to the community, as there will be for every community, right? Culture, issues of culture, issues pertaining to language. These are all issues that every community will hold dear to themselves. And I think for the Malay Muslim community in particular, in my engagements, many of them aspire towards getting ahead in life, doing better, progressing together with the nation, but at the same time upholding the traditional culture, beliefs, and values that they have as a community. And I think that's very valuable, and we will continue to find ways to help the community do so. And the Islamic College is one initiative in that direction, where yes, we have sent our religious scholars overseas for studies, but I think we can find a way, a model in Singapore where some of them can study here in Singapore. We are still working out the details. There are things to be fleshed out, and there will be opportunity for me later on as we put together the details to flesh out what this new college entails, and how it will provide more pathways for Malay Muslim students interested in Islamic studies to pursue an education, not necessarily overseas, but here in Singapore. And we will be able to flesh out the details quite soon later in the year.
Okay, thank you, PM. Let's take the last few questions. Shin Min first.
Hello, PM. Lulu here from Xinmin. So we have a slightly longer question. It's on the issue of cost of living. You have mentioned the challenges arising from global factors that are beyond Singapore's control, such as supply chain disruptions and regional conflicts. While you assured Singaporeans that the government will continue to provide support when necessary, some have expressed concerns about the level of detail provided on future measures. For example, the CDC vouchers for 2025 are set at $300 so far, as compared to $800 this year. So given the ongoing inflationary pressures, will the government be giving more assistance in terms of CDC vouchers? And how do you plan to balance these pressures with the support needed to help Singaporeans manage their living expenses? And also, just in case it doesn't get asked, common reactions called this NDR as not an election NDR. What are your thoughts on that?
I leave people to say what they want about the National Day rally. Somehow there are these labels attached all the time, whether it's a budget. This year's budget too, I was asked the question, is this an election budget or not an election budget? I don't know. I leave it to people to make their commentaries. Same for the National Day rally. On cost of living and whether or not there will be more help, well, the CDC vouchers for 2025, you said it's less than 2024, but we haven't had the 25 budget yet. That's next year, early next year. So whether or not there will be more CDC vouchers, I think everyone should just wait and see what is in the budget announcement. But as I mentioned just now, there are different kinds of help measures. Some are broad-based. CDC vouchers is broad-based. Every family gets the same amount. And it's very hard for us, through CDC vouchers, to sort of adjust the amount by family, by income, by circumstances, because then it makes a system a lot more complicated. So CDC vouchers is one scheme where everyone gets something. Broad-based help. But we also have other types of help besides CDC vouchers. This year, we are giving out cost of living payouts, cash payouts, for example, targeted at lower to lower middle income groups. We've got utility save rebates, for example, SNCC rebates. So these are more focused, targeted helps, and we will continue to review to see whether it's broad-based or targeted measures, which ones, or how best to provide adequate support for the people who need help. And then, of course, as I mentioned just now, there is one new group which we think can benefit from more help, larger families, because we think their circumstances, given with more young children, the expenses do add up, and we are prepared to, and we are thinking about how we can provide more help to them. So we are indeed focused on looking at all of these different segments and thinking of different ways in which we can help address cost of living. Even as we do so, we will also focus or look at the broader macro environment. What is our inflation rate going to be like by the end of this year? We already see some signs of moderation, which is helpful. What do we expect inflation to be next year? What do we expect growth and incomes to be like this year, for example? And what is it going to be next year? Last year was a difficult year for us because last year inflation remained quite high and growth was very weak, about 1% growth. And many Singaporeans experienced negative real wage increases. Their real wage actually came down. So understandably, there was a lot of pressure. So we will have to look at the data and what the indicators are with regards to income and inflation this year and next year, and then think about how we can put together the appropriate help, whether broad-based or targeted for the different segments, and we will do so in the budget in 2025.
Okay, thank you, PM. Thanks to the journalists. Last two questions. Tamil Murasu and then Mothership.
Yeah, why don't you both ask a question if you...
Thank you, PM. Good afternoon. Thank you for saying a few words in Tamil during your NDR speech.
I hope I got the pronunciation correct.
You did. It was right. Thank you for that. My question for you is that there's a lot of focus or mention about reset of policies. In that, are there any non-negotiable policies where we can't reset? Some of the policies or ideals that have formed the foundations or the bedrock of how Singapore was built so far. That is one. Second question, Before stepping down as PM, Mr. Lee actually mentioned in his last interview about the issue of integration in the Indian community. So in particular, he was mentioning about the assimilation between the local Indians and the naturalized citizens. In what ways will you be looking at, in addressing this issue? Thank you.
PM, I'm from Tamil News and Current Affairs Media Corp. I also have a question for you. You said you would like to engage with the public to know more about your concerns, and you rightfully also pointed out that each community has their specific sets of concerns as well. So can we expect more personal dialogue sessions with you, with like the various communities, so we can address community specific issues and concerns?
For sure. I mean, it's not just with me alone. If I have to do everything, then I can't be at multiple places all at one time. But it's not just with me alone. I will be doing more engagements with Singaporeans at large, but also with specific communities, as I have been doing, Chinese, Malay, Indian, Eurasian, and others. But my colleagues in the rest of my team, they will also be doing the similar engagements, because as a team, as I mentioned earlier, our commitment to Singaporeans is that we will be there to listen, to hear firsthand the concerns and hopes of every Singaporean, and to work together to translate our shared aspirations to reality. So for sure, we want to do that. On the first question, what is sacrosanct, what will not change? I would say not so much policies, but the core principles and values underpinning the policies. Multiracialism is one policy. Meritocracy, is one key principle. Multiracialism, meritocracy. These are very fundamental principles. Incorruptibility, right? These fundamental principles and values cannot be compromised. But how these principles are manifested in policies, well, you can have a debate, Is this the best way to go about upholding multiracialism? Is this the best policy to go about upholding meritocracy, or perhaps has it led to inadvertent consequences where people feel very stressed, or you lead to a sense of elitism or entitlement, perhaps? Well, then we can discuss how should the policy change, how should we improve. So it's really differentiating between the core principles and values as opposed to the manifestation of them in policies, which we will always be prepared to review our assumptions to see what can work better. Yeah. You had one more, is it? Integration. Local and new arrivals, right? This is work in progress. I think all communities, almost all, but the Indian community, the Chinese community, particularly there will be issues where integration comes up, and we know that these issues do arise, and we will continue to engage all the different groups. Our starting point is that we must remain an open society. We welcome all who come here and are prepared to embrace our values and our way of life. So there are house rules. It's not just anyone comes, but there are house rules. We control the flow and we bring them in. At the same time, we as Singaporeans must do our part to be big-hearted, gracious, generous, and welcome them as part of the Singapore family. There will always be frictions from time to time that arises from these sorts of interactions, but over time, as the new arrivals come in, adjust to our way of life, as their children go through our school system, the sons do national service, they become Singaporeans like our forefathers did. So I think this must continue to be our ethos as a society of immigrants, as a nation of immigrants, and we just have to keep on working hard at managing such integration matters.
Mothership, please, to conclude.
Hi PM, my name is Hannah and I'm from Mothership. So my partner recently forwarded me the 10-week shared parental leave, and I take that as an encouraging sign that young people are probably thinking about having kids as one option. So what advice would you give young Singaporeans who are weighing the pros and cons of starting a family? And my second question is, as someone who harbors ambitions to go to LA 2028 to represent Singapore as an athlete,
well done.
we're crossing our fingers there. We're starting training soon. What do you wish to say to aspiring athletes like myself or anyone else that are growing up right now?
Well, the first point, my advice is go forth, embrace your marriage and parenthood journey. I mean, like I said, it's a personal decision. I can't impose on you what my views are. And I know that, you talk to many parents who are worried about their children. The more sometimes they nag at their kids, the more counterproductive it is. And I think the same might apply in government too. But what we can and what we will do is, as I said, do our best to build a Singapore made for families, create an environment that's conducive for parents, young parents, and for children. And when that, I think it's work in progress. We are getting better today than before, but we will continue to be better. And as we create that new environment, as we start shaping and building a new culture that embraces families, marriage and parenthood, hopefully it will motivate and encourage more young people to take that step to get married and settle down and have their own kids. On athletes, we are doing much more to support them compared to the past. The entire sports ecosystem is a lot more vibrant, a lot more government support has been put in. But I would also say it's not just government alone, because you do see more company sponsors. More can be done, but I think more companies are stepping forward to sponsor our athletes. More are also prepared to take them on after they retire from sports, because you can only be in full-time sports for up to a certain period of time. And after that, what happens? What is your post-sporting career going to be? And if more companies are prepared to step forward and say, look, I value these young athletes because of their attributes, their grit, their resilience, they are team players, they have overcome adversity, so they make for good employees, then I think it gives a lot of assurance to young athletes that I can focus on my sports during this period of time, and later when I step down from sports, I will still be able to continue on with something else in life. And I think all of these different pieces in our ecosystem are starting to come together. Combined with our plans for Kallang Alive, I am hopeful that we can really create vibrant and viable pathways for any person in Singapore to pursue their sporting dreams and realize their sporting dreams. This is for sports, but we want that same conversation to happen in other fields too. So whether it's in the arts, whether it's in sports, whether it's in business, whether it's in careers, conventional or non-conventional, whether it's some young person who wants to do a startup, whatever it is, we want to build a Singapore where everyone can realize their dreams.